AITA for changing the locks after discovering my sister has been secretly living in my apartment with her boyfriend when I travel for work. Hi everyone! Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've been dealing with some seriously weird family boundary issues that I need to get off my chest. My sister Jennifer is 31, and we've always had what I thought was a normal sibling relationship. Some bickering growing up, but generally got along fine as adults. Here's the situation. I work in consulting and travel about 60% of the time for projects that can last anywhere from a few days to several weeks. I've got a nice one-bedroom apartment in downtown that I worked hard to afford, and it's my sanctuary when I'm home. About 8 months ago, my parents asked if Jennifer could have a spare key for emergencies. They said things like, "What if something happens to the apartment while you're gone?" and "It would give us peace of mind knowing someone could check on things." Being the good son, I agreed and made her a copy. I should mention that Jennifer has always been the golden child. She's got this whole free-spirited artist thing going on, and my parents have always been more supportive of her creative journey than my corporate career path. They've bailed her out financially more times than I can count, always with the excuse that artists need time to find their footing. Meanwhile, I've been completely self-sufficient since college. The first sign something was off came about 3 months ago. I returned from a 2-week project in Denver, and little things in my apartment seemed different. The couch cushions weren't quite how I left them. There were dishes in the drying rack that I was pretty sure I hadn't used. My Netflix had shows in the continue watching section that I definitely hadn't been watching. When I mentioned it to Jennifer casually, she just laughed and said she'd stopped by to water my plants, which, by the way, I don't have any plants. Then last month, I came home from a week-long project in Phoenix to find a half-empty container of leftover Chinese food in my fridge with Jennifer's name written on it in her handwriting. There was also a coffee mug in the sink with lipstick stains, a shade I'd never seen Jennifer wear, but definitely her style. In my bedroom, I found long blonde hairs on my pillow. Jennifer has long blonde hair, I have short brown hair, and my bathroom had definitely been used by someone who owned a lot more beauty products than I do. The final straw was 2 weeks ago. I had planned to be in Seattle for 10 days, but the project wrapped up early and I flew home 3 days ahead of schedule. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back early. I just wanted to surprise myself with some unexpected downtime. When I unlocked my apartment at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday night, I found evidence that someone had been there recently. The bed was made, but not the way I make it. There were 2 wine glasses in the sink. My streaming services showed recent activity. Most damning of all, I found a receipt from the grocery store down the street dated that morning, crumpled in my kitchen trash can, for items I definitely didn't buy. I confronted Jennifer the next day, and she got incredibly defensive. She insisted she was just checking on things, and maybe stopped by for a quick rest during her errands. When I pressed her about the grocery receipt and the wine glasses, she accused me of being paranoid and controlling. She actually said, "It's just an apartment, James. Why are you being so weird about this?" My parents, of course, took her side when I brought it up. They said I was being ungrateful and that Jennifer was doing me a favor by keeping an eye on the place. My mom actually said, "She's your sister, not a stranger. What's the big deal if she uses it occasionally?" When I explained that I hadn't given permission for her to essentially use my apartment as a secondary residence, my dad called me selfish and said families should help each other out. The thing is, I wouldn't have minded if she just asked. If Jennifer had said, "Hey, can I use your place occasionally when you're traveling?" I probably would have said yes with some ground rules. But this sneaky, behind-my-back usage feels like a massive violation of my privacy and boundaries. It's my home that I pay rent on, not some family vacation house. I'm seriously considering changing the locks, but I know it'll cause a huge family blow-up. Jennifer and my parents are already treating me like I'm the unreasonable one in this situation. My mom keeps texting me about family unity and how I'm creating unnecessary drama. But I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I wrong for wanting control over who uses my personal living space? Has anyone else dealt with family members who think boundaries don't apply to them? How do you handle it when your own parents enable this kind of behavior? Update 1, 2 weeks later. I installed security cameras and holy ***. Okay, so I know my original post got a lot of responses telling me to change the locks immediately, but I decided to gather some concrete evidence first. I installed a couple of discrete security cameras in my living room and bedroom. Nothing creepy, just basic monitoring to see what was actually happening when I was gone. I left for a project in Austin last Monday, telling my family I'd be gone for 10 days. The cameras were motion-activated and sent notifications to my phone. Within 48 hours of leaving, I started getting alerts. Tuesday evening, Jennifer entered the apartment around 8 p.m. She wasn't alone. She brought a guy with her, tall, dark hair, looked to be around her age. They clearly made themselves comfortable, ordering takeout and watching Netflix on my couch. They were drinking wine from my wine glasses and generally acting like they owned the place. Wednesday, Jennifer showed up again around 6 p.m., this time alone. She went straight to my bedroom, and based on the camera timestamps, she spent the night there. The motion sensor showed activity in the bedroom from about 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next morning. Thursday through Saturday, Jennifer was there every single night. Sometimes alone, sometimes with the same guy from Tuesday. They were cooking in my kitchen, sleeping in my bed, and basically living like a couple in my apartment. On Friday night, they even had what looked like a dinner party. I counted at least 4 different people through my living room camera. Sunday, Jennifer came by in the afternoon, did laundry, using my detergent, cleaned up evidence of the weekend's activities, and restocked my fridge with groceries. I guess this was her way of covering her tracks before I returned. I was absolutely livid. This wasn't occasional checking on the apartment. This was Jennifer using my home as her primary residence while I was traveling, complete with entertaining guests and hosting parties. She had essentially been living a double life in my space. I confronted her with the video evidence yesterday. Instead of being apologetic, she got angry at me for spying on her. She said I had violated her privacy by installing cameras. When I pointed out that it was my apartment, she accused me of being a control freak and said she thought we had an understanding about her using the space. The conversation got heated when she told me that her lease was up at her old place and she'd been between apartments for the past few months. Apparently, she'd been using my place as temporary housing without bothering to mention this rather important detail. When I asked why she didn't just tell me the truth, she said she knew I'd make a big deal about it, and that she planned to find her own place eventually. My parents' reaction was even worse. When I showed them the video evidence, my mother's first response was, "Well, at least she's keeping the place clean." My father suggested that I should just work out a roommate arrangement with Jennifer since she clearly needed a place to stay. They both acted like I was being unreasonable for being upset about discovering my sister had been secretly living in my apartment for months. The guy she'd been bringing over? Turns out that's Michael, her new boyfriend, who she also failed to mention she was essentially shacking up with in my space. They'd been having their entire relationship play out in my bedroom while I was out of town working. I've given Jennifer until the end of this week to return the key and remove any belongings she might have stashed in my apartment. I've also made it clear that she's no longer welcome there under any circumstances. She's been blowing up my phone with texts alternating between apologies and accusations, but I'm done. Changing the locks this weekend regardless. I'll deal with the family fallout, but I refuse to be taken advantage of anymore. Update 2, 2 months later. Changed the locks, family war ensued. Well, Reddit, it's been an interesting 2 months since my last update. As promised, I changed the locks that weekend and didn't give anyone in my family a spare key. The locksmith was actually pretty cool about it. Turns out he's dealt with similar family boundary issues and didn't even blink when I explained the situation. Jennifer's reaction to the lock change was dramatic. She showed up at my apartment the following Tuesday, I was in town that week, and had a complete meltdown in my hallway when her key didn't work. My neighbors later told me she spent 20 minutes ringing my buzzer and pounding on the door, yelling about how I was abandoning family and being petty and vindictive. I wasn't home, but the security cameras caught the whole thing. She actually tried using her phone to record herself giving a tearful speech about how hurt she was, presumably for social media sympathy. The family pressure campaign started immediately. My parents called me multiple times that week, with my mother crying about how I was tearing the family apart, and my father threatening to reconsider my position in family events if I didn't give Jennifer the key back. They tried every guilt trip in the book. I was being selfish, Jennifer needed support during a difficult time, family means helping each other unconditionally, and my personal favorite, I was punishing Jennifer for being vulnerable. My extended family got dragged into it too. My Aunt Susan called to lecture me about family loyalty. My Uncle Robert sent me a long text about how disappointed he was in my behavior. Even my grandmother got involved, telling me during our weekly phone call that she'd raised us better than this. Jennifer had apparently been making the rounds, painting herself as the victim of her cruel, heartless brother who cared more about property than family. The worst part was the family barbecue last month. I almost didn't go, but I figured I needed to face the music eventually. The moment I walked into my parents' backyard, the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. Jennifer was there with Michael, apparently they're officially living together now, just not in my apartment, and she made a point of loudly telling anyone who would listen about how she was working on finding a stable living situation after her brother cut her off without warning. My cousin Patricia actually pulled me aside and asked if the rumors were true, that I'd evicted Jennifer after she'd been helping me by house-sitting. The story had gotten completely twisted in the family telephone game. According to the version making the rounds, I was an ungrateful brother who had taken advantage of Jennifer's generosity and then callously thrown her out when it was no longer convenient for me. I tried to set the record straight with a few family members, even showing my cousin David some of the security camera footage on my phone. His reaction was telling. He was shocked that Jennifer had basically been running a part-time household in my apartment without permission. He agreed that what she'd done was way out of line, but he also said I should have handled it more diplomatically to avoid the family drama. Work became my refuge during this period. Being on the road meant I didn't have to deal with the constant family pressure, and my colleagues had no idea about the domestic drama. My apartment felt peaceful again. No surprise visitors, no mysterious dishes in the sink, no strange hairs on my pillow. I even bought some actual plants, and it's been nice coming home to a space that's genuinely mine. Jennifer made several more attempts to contact me directly. She tried showing up at my office building, thankfully security didn't let her up, sent flowers with an apology card, which I threw away, and even had Michael call me to mediate the situation. In that conversation, Michael actually had the audacity to suggest that I should compromise by giving Jennifer access to the apartment just a couple times a month when she needed space. I hung up on him. The breaking point with my parents came 3 weeks ago. They invited me to dinner and then surprise ambushed me with Jennifer being there. The whole thing was clearly planned as an intervention. They'd prepared speeches about forgiveness, family bonds, and moving forward. Jennifer had apparently prepared an apology that hit all the right notes about respecting boundaries and understanding my perspective, but then she immediately followed it up with a request to work out a solution that works for everyone. I left dinner early that night, and I haven't spoken to my parents since. They've left several voicemails that I haven't returned. I'm tired of being treated like the villain in a situation where I was clearly the one who was wronged. The weirdest part of all this is that I actually feel lighter. The family drama is exhausting, but removing myself from people who consistently disrespect my boundaries has been liberating. I've been sleeping better, my stress levels have dropped, and I'm not constantly worried about what I'll find when I come home from business trips. Some college friends who knew the whole story have been incredibly supportive. My buddy Kevin said something that really stuck with me. Dude, if someone who wasn't your sister had been secretly living in your apartment and bringing dates over, you'd have called the police. Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to violate your space and privacy. I'm not sure where things stand with my family long-term. The silent treatment from my parents is probably going to continue until I cave and give Jennifer what she wants, but I'm not budging on this. My apartment is my sanctuary, and I'm not going back to the anxiety of never knowing what I'll find when I get home. Update 3, 6 months later. The truth comes out and everything changes. Reddit, I need to share what happened last week because it completely changed my perspective on this entire situation. I'm honestly still processing it all, but I feel like I owe you an update since so many of you have been following this story. I was in Chicago for a project when I got a call from my Uncle Robert, the same one who had lectured me about family loyalty months earlier. He sounded different this time, less judgmental and more concerned. He told me that Jennifer had been staying with him and my Aunt Carol for the past week, and that there were some things about her situation that I needed to know. Apparently, Jennifer had finally broken down and told someone in the family the truth about what had been happening over the past year. The real truth, not the version she'd been feeding everyone about me being cruel and unreasonable. Here's what I learned. Jennifer lost her job as a freelance graphic designer about 14 months ago, right around the time she started asking for the key to my apartment. It wasn't just a temporary setback. Her biggest client dropped her after she missed several deadlines, and the freelance work dried up completely afterward. She'd been living off her savings and credit cards, but by the time she approached our parents about the apartment key, she was already behind on rent and facing eviction. The between apartments story she told me during our confrontation was partially true, but she'd glossed over the fact that she'd been between apartments because she'd been evicted for non-payment. She'd lost her lease, couldn't afford a new place, and was essentially homeless but too ashamed to admit it to anyone in the family. My parents knew some of this. They'd been giving her money for expenses, but they thought it was just temporary help while she got back on her feet. They had no idea she was literally using my apartment as her primary residence. When she asked for the emergency key, she told them she was worried about my place sitting empty so much, not that she desperately needed somewhere to live. The boyfriend, Michael? He was also essentially homeless. They'd met at a coffee shop where he was spending his days because he couldn't afford utilities at his own place. Two broke people who found each other and were trying to make it work while keeping up appearances with everyone around them. Uncle Robert told me that Jennifer had been having panic attacks about the family situation. She was terrified that I would tell everyone she'd been lying about her financial situation, and she was even more terrified about facing the reality of being genuinely homeless. The boyfriend had found work recently and gotten a small apartment, But Jennifer was still sleeping on friends' couches and trying to piece together enough freelance work to get back on her feet. When he finished explaining everything, Uncle Robert asked me if I'd be willing to talk to Jennifer directly. He said she wanted to apologize for real this time, not the performative apology she'd given at the family dinner, but she was too scared to reach out to me herself. I agreed to meet her for coffee yesterday when I got back from Chicago. The Jennifer who showed up was not the confident, defensive person I'd been dealing with for months. She looked exhausted, defeated, and genuinely ashamed. She started crying before she even sat down. Her apology was completely different this time. She admitted that she'd been living in my apartment regularly for almost 10 months before I caught her. She admitted that she'd been bringing Michael there because they literally had nowhere else to go that was warm and private. She admitted that she'd lied to our parents about the extent of her financial problems and had manipulated the emergency key situation because she was desperate. But here's the part that got to me. She also admitted that she'd been too proud and ashamed to just ask me for help directly. She said she knew I was doing well financially, and she knew I probably would have helped her if she'd been honest, but she couldn't bear the thought of being seen as the failure of the family. She'd rather lie and sneak around than admit that the free-spirited artist persona had fallen apart and she was struggling to survive. The guilt I felt in that moment was overwhelming. Here I'd been feeling violated and disrespected, which were valid feelings given how she'd handled things, but I'd had no idea she was actually homeless and scared. All those months of family drama, and the real issue was that my sister was too ashamed to admit she needed help. We talked for 3 hours. I learned that she'd been eating ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for most meals because she couldn't afford groceries. She'd been doing her laundry in my apartment because she couldn't afford the laundromat. She'd been hosting the dinner party I'd seen on camera because Michael had gotten a small freelance gig and they wanted to thank the friends who'd been helping them get by, and my apartment was the only place they could think of where they could cook a real meal for people. I also learned that our parents had been giving her small amounts of money, but she'd been too proud to tell them how bad things really were. They thought they were helping with temporary expenses, not literally keeping her fed and housed. The conversation ended with me making a decision that surprised both of us. I offered to let Jennifer stay in my apartment temporarily while she got back on her feet, but with clear boundaries and expectations this time. Here's the arrangement we worked out. 1. Jennifer can stay in my apartment when I'm traveling for work, but she has to be completely moved out before I return home. No exceptions. 2. She pays me $400 per month, which covers utilities and food she might consume, plus a small contribution to rent. It's way below market rate, but it's what she can afford right now. 3. No guests without my explicit permission. Michael can visit during the day, but overnight stays need to be approved in advance. 4. She's responsible for keeping the place clean and exactly as she found it. 5. We have a written agreement with a timeline. This arrangement lasts for 6 months while she saves money and gets back on her feet. After that, she needs her own place. 6. Complete honesty about her financial situation and job search progress. We check in every 2 weeks via video call. 7. She gets counseling to deal with the pride and shame issues that led to the situation in the first place. The family reaction to this development has been interesting. My parents are relieved that we're working things out, but I think they're also a bit embarrassed that they didn't realize how serious Jennifer's situation actually was. My mom called to thank me for being the bigger person, which honestly annoyed me because this was never about being bigger or smaller, it was about basic respect and honesty. Some of my extended family members who had been giving me grief have quietly reached out to apologize for judging the situation without knowing all the facts. My cousin Patricia sent me a long text about how she should have asked more questions instead of just assuming I was being heartless. Jennifer started the new arrangement this week. I'm currently in Seattle for a 10-day project, and she's staying at the apartment. We've been texting daily. She sends me photos showing that she's keeping things clean and respecting the space. It's weird, but it actually feels good to know that I'm helping her get back on her feet while still maintaining my boundaries. The irony is that if she'd just been honest with me from the beginning, we could have avoided 9 months of drama and family warfare. I would have been happy to help my sister who was struggling. I just needed to be asked respectfully instead of having my space invaded secretly. Michael got a full-time job 2 weeks ago, and he and Jennifer are looking at apartments together for when our 6-month arrangement ends. Jennifer has been picking up more freelance work and is considering going back to school to get certified in web development, which has better job security than freelance graphic design. I'm cautiously optimistic about how this is working out. The relationship with Jennifer feels more honest than it has in years, and I think we're both learning better ways to communicate about difficult topics. The family drama seems to be settling down now that everyone knows the real story. The biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the people who seem the most entitled and unreasonable are actually just scared and ashamed. That doesn't excuse the lying and boundary violations, but it does help explain them. Jennifer and I are rebuilding trust slowly, and for the first time in months, I feel like we're actually siblings again instead of adversaries. Final update, 1 year later. How things turned out. I know it's been a while since my last update, but I wanted to share how everything ultimately resolved because this community was so supportive throughout the whole ordeal. The 6-month arrangement with Jennifer worked better than either of us expected. She stuck to every single rule we'd established, and our bi-weekly check-ins became something I actually looked forward to. Watching her rebuild her confidence and financial stability was genuinely rewarding, and it felt good to know I was helping without being taken advantage of. Jennifer ended up moving in with Michael after 4 months when he got promoted and they could afford a decent 1-bedroom apartment together. She insisted on paying me for the full 6 months anyway because, in her words, "You gave me stability when I needed it most, and that has value beyond just the time I used the space." The most surprising development was how much our relationship improved through this process. The enforced honesty and clear boundaries actually brought us closer than we'd been since childhood. We started having regular dinner dates when I was in town, and Jennifer began asking my advice about business decisions and career planning. It turns out that my corporate experience was actually valuable to her as she rebuilt her freelance business. Jennifer finished a web development certification program 6 months ago and now has a hybrid career doing both graphic design and web development. Her income is more stable than it ever was before, and she's been steadily paying down the debt she accumulated during her difficult period. She also followed through on the counseling requirement, which she credits with helping her address the pride and communication issues that led to the original problem. Michael proposed to Jennifer last month, and she asked me to be her person of honor at their wedding next spring. When she told me, she joked that I'm probably the only brother who helped save his sister's relationship by initially kicking her out of his apartment. Their relationship is much stronger now that they're not constantly stressed about housing and basic survival. My relationship with my parents took longer to repair. I think they were embarrassed about how they'd handled the situation, especially once they learned the full truth about Jennifer's circumstances. My mom eventually admitted that they should have checked with me before giving Jennifer the key, and that they should have encouraged Jennifer to be honest about her situation from the beginning instead of enabling the secrecy. My dad struggled more with acknowledging that he'd been wrong, but he came around when he saw how well the new arrangement was working for everyone. He told me recently that he's proud of how I handled everything, both the boundary setting and the ultimate willingness to help once I understood the real situation. The extended family drama mostly resolved itself once the truth came out. Most of my relatives who had been critical of me reached out to apologize, and family gatherings are back to normal. There's less drama overall, actually, because Jennifer is happier and more stable, which means fewer crisis situations for everyone to get worked up about. I've kept the security cameras in my apartment, but now it's just for general peace of mind rather than sibling surveillance. Jennifer still has a key for actual emergencies. The difference is that now it's a key I gave her explicitly, with clear expectations about when and how it should be used. The biggest change for me personally is that I've gotten much better at setting and maintaining boundaries with my family. The whole experience taught me that it's possible to be helpful and supportive without being a pushover, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's dysfunction. I also learned that my family's pattern of avoiding difficult conversations and pretending everything is fine was actually making problems worse for everyone. Now when issues come up, we address them directly instead of hoping they'll resolve themselves. It's occasionally awkward, but it's much healthier than the old system of secrets and resentment. Jennifer and I laugh about the whole situation now. She calls it, "the year I accidentally became your secret roommate," and I call it, "the time you turned my apartment into a sitcom without telling me I was in the show." The shared humor about it feels like a sign that we've really moved past the hurt and broken trust. Looking back, I'm grateful for how everything turned out, even though it was painful and frustrating at the time. Jennifer got the help she needed, I learned to set better boundaries, our family improved their communication patterns, and our relationship is stronger than ever. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes if you're willing to work through them honestly. For anyone dealing with similar family boundary issues, stand firm on your limits, but stay open to the possibility that there might be more to the story than you initially understand. People don't usually violate boundaries for fun. There's usually fear, shame, or desperation underneath the bad behavior. That doesn't mean you have to tolerate being mistreated, but it might mean that the real solution is more complex than just cutting people off. Thanks to everyone who offered advice and support throughout this whole saga. This community helped me feel less crazy during some very frustrating months, and I appreciate all the perspective you provided. Jennifer and Michael are doing great, my family relationships are healthier than they've been in years, and my apartment is still my peaceful sanctuary, but now it's also occasionally a safe haven for people I care about when they need it most. That feels like the right balance.